I'm very fascinated about this light language. Can you talk about where you learned and the history of light language?
I don't know that I know the history of light language. Right. Let's see. I was on the verge of creating a new program, a birth wound transformation journey. So it was a few years ago. And I had a dream that light language was going to be part of it. I did not know how to speak light language. I also had sort of this judgment around it that it was a weird thing and people were going to think I was weird for doing it because it's like sounds coming out of you that really make no sense to, if you speak English, it doesn't make sense. If you speak Russian, it doesn't make sense. It's just like these sounds. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm a weirdo. This is going to happen and it's going to happen in front of people. But I just went with it because I'm not going to hold back what needs to come out. And I don't specifically remember how it finally came out. I think I was listening to Ann Tucker's angelic frequencies, and at the same time, someone had channeled a message for me. Yeah, it's not coming to me about exactly how it happened. Maybe you remember the story, but whatever the case, I just, I remember I was waking up at, I think 3 or 4 a.m. every morning. And like right at the same time every morning for about a week. And I thought, this is ridiculous. I need to find out why this is happening. And I looked on, I think it was like some Chinese chart of like times of the day when things are happening in your body. And that happened to be correlated with the lung. And right away I said, oh, that's the light language part because the lung is about expression. And so once I understood that's why I was waking up, I just kind of went into my own light conduit. I made my connection with my guides and I just felt this overwhelming force that I just needed to open and speak. So I did, and what came out was light language. And it was at that time I was feeling sadness about the loss of animals in forest. And so I just started kind of speaking light language to help heal the forest. And so then soon after that was my first birth wound transformation journey that I took a group through, and I'm still doing that. It's just it has transformed a lot since then. But in the first galactic partner integration, the light language was really important. And I think it's important because it speaks to our soul. It overrides our logic. It does not allow us to even think when we're listening to it because it doesn't make sense if we try to think about it. And I know I've had people say that it just takes them to a different place because it's not a logical language. It's a feeling that's being conveyed through sounds. And so when you receive it, it's like you know what it means and you're able to take that in, even if you don't, even if you can't put words to it or understand any part of it logically. So that was really important in the first series because from what I was able to ascertain about why that was so important is because people have a lot of resistance. And the whole idea was that the the integrations were going to bring in a missing piece of us and allow us to be more deeply connected with our guides, our own higher dimensions. And so we have so much resistance to that. That resistance needed to be overridden. And that's what the light language did. And it brought in a lot of, and I want to say healing, but again, it wasn't meant to be a healing, but it still brought, it really did heal people from that, from that resistance. And in the second one, I thought it was going to be the same. I thought it was going to be more light language, but it turns out that it wasn't. Everybody was integrated enough so that they could hear all of the messages clearly. And that's a really important part of it was that everybody needed to have done the first integration before moving into the second one It was sort of a clear requirement when I knew that I was developing the second one. So the second group had already been through the first. They had already overcome that resistance and received some activations and codes and received clearings. And then you come to the second one and you are more of yourself. And I think that goes back to why they asked you a question, because you were more of yourself,
I
that you
see.
could be part of the answer.
So you did not take a course to learn light languages, it just came through you.
That's right.
Oh, wow. So light language, it's very individual. It does not belong to a certain group or culture.
I've heard that it does. And when somebody channeled for me one time about it, and I know that this came through in one of my birth wound healings, somebody had a dream about it, is that it is from, I think, the Orion group. And it turns out that I had already known that that's part of my galactic lineage. And so when somebody told me when they were channeling on it, I said, "Oh yeah, that makes sense to me. It's that makes sense." And then somebody also had a dream about Ra, the sun god, which I knew during when I was first doing light language that it was messaging from Ra, but that changes. So it just kind of depends on what I'm there to channel. And like I said, for GPI, it was everybody's galactic partners that came through me. It wasn't just one person or one being or another, it was everybody's. And as I said, Metatron came through and some messages about sacred geometry, but it really isn't just one being or one group of beings. It's a universal language, in my opinion, in my experience. Like it can be whatever is in somebody else's experience. I'm not refuting any of that. That's just my experience.
So our galactic partner is a group, including our guides, angels, and our higher self, and our ancestors. Am I right?
I feel like people need to discover that on their own.
Okay, I like
It
that.
it really is, though. Like what you're saying, I think is a really good representation, because the main messaging is that we are all together. We are all one. So why wouldn't that be the case? Why
Mhm.
wouldn't what you're saying be the case?
I was watching someone else's spiritual teacher's podcast, and they said our spirit guides are just an extension of ourselves. It's like all of us make up the hand, and I just a thumb, but we together we can do what a whole hand can do. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. That totally resonates with me and with the messages in GPI. There's just some really good gems in those recordings, some really good quotes. And I can't remember exactly that one,
Yeah.
but there is definitely one that is similar to that. Like I think it's something like the power of one is the power of many is the
Yeah.
power of one. Yeah. And that's exactly that, is that, yes, we are ultimately responsible for building up our own power, but really we are building up everybody when we do that.
Mhm. Yeah, and I remember I was listening to either the first series and the last session or the first session of the second series. I remember I went back to when I was an infant and even when I was like in a past life, and I was able to heal from then. There I was, and I think a lot of tears were shed. I remember you told me that the Galactic Partnership was not meant to heal. And then I was like, after I listened to that, a lot of the anger were gone. So I think part of it is just when we are overwhelmed, we can hold on to things very tightly. So the Galactic Partnership program may not be really able to help us on a deeper level, but at least it is able to help us open up and release the anger. Because to heal, to really heal, it may need a bit more work, need to like reconstruct what happened and reframe what happened in the past, and then more healing can happen. But that alone, like releasing those anger or fear or worry, those energies, releasing them alone is already very helpful.
Yeah, and you've done a lot of work. You've done a lot of trauma release to get you to that point where it could just be dissolved. And so that's why it felt like to me that it wasn't really meant to be a healing, but it turns out that it is because it just breaks that stuff apart and it, like the
Yeah.
remaining what you're still holding on to, you've done all the work to get to that point where you don't need it anymore, but it can still be hanging around, maybe threatening in some way. But yeah, it just allows that to leave. It brings you to frequency. And
Mm.
when you are frequency and when you are connected with those around you that were in the group, you can't hold on to that. You can only hold on to, what's your true frequency and what is your true nature. As we know from the eighth recording, what it turns out that all of our true nature is.
Yeah. And I think with your group and Tucker's, Elizabeth, and now your 9 by 9 program, when we're around you and people who are like you, who are like us, we cannot help but move forward and let go. It just,
Exactly. We
yeah,
can't. We can't hang on anymore.
yeah, it's just so important to surround yourself with the right people. And you've done so much work, not just creating these programs, but also creating community as well. You have a Telegram group, you have a WhatsApp group. So, and whenever I post something, you always reply really fast. And I'm so appreciative of that. How much energy and heart you put into programming and into helping others.
Yeah, I think everybody's important.